All right, let's continue after a very interesting talk with a lot of questions. Next up we have, do you have a PlugX by Artem Artemov and Rustam Mirkasymov from Group-IB Europe? Thank you.
Just a few pictures now, right now. Yeah.
Do you have PlugX? So today we'll give you some advice as how you can check that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Artem Artemov. I'm the head of digital forensic and incident response team at Group-IB. 14 years in digital forensics, with the last 10 years in Group-IB. I've taken place in investigation and arrest of such groups like Carberp, Corcow, Moneytaker, Cobalt group, and what else? I also provide some digital forensic courses in several universities.
And me, Rustam Mirkasymov, I'm head of cyber threat research department here. Previously, I worked in threat intelligence department of Group-IB. And most of reports published by the company, they're available following this QR code. Me and my team, most of them were written by me and my team. So if you find anything there interesting and you would like to speak with me, feel free to contact via Twitter.
So our story is based on a few real incident responses. And by incidents, we mean that the data of a company, private data of the company, was compromised and the confidentiality, availability, and integrity was harmed somehow. On the right side of the slide, you can see a list of APT groups that using PlugX. So having PlugX inside your network means the compromise of your data, basically. What do you see in common between these groups? The red flag with the star, and it's not the USSR, comrades. So APT groups use different versions and assemblies of PlugX for their operations, use different options for loading them, obfuscating, while leaving the general conceptual features of PlugX unchanged through the years. And this makes it possible to identify samples of the family and as well as to attribute those versions to one or another group. You see a lot of Panda, so Chinese APTs is most known like Panda groups, so I decided to put some Pandas in my presentation. With the aim of military, political, and industrial espionage, these APT groups carry out attacks mainly on government agencies, enterprises of military industrial complex, and research institutes and telecommunication companies. So let's take a look at the first example. Usually incident response starts with a night call. I think that one of you who makes incident response, you know that it's always Thursday or Friday night, yeah, and you need to work through the weekend. But this time it was different. We made an unexpected call to our customer. We have a solution that detects APT, at least it tries to detect. It's not a net, that's how it worked that time. On August 16 of 2018, we detected strange communication during one of our proof of concept installation in one of company. Unfortunately, I can't tell you the name of the company. It was somewhere in Russia. The first thing that grabbed our attention was too many connections to Chinese IPs. There may be some connections from Android devices of users, but still there was so many. And the second thing, we see the connections to PlugX CNCs, and after 10 days, we still was not on the crime scene. We were not on the crime scene, but we noticed a few connections to Cobalt strike CNCs. After a bureaucracy, we came to the crime scene, and we were lucky to, from the beginning, we know a few infected hosts. At first, we found file fs GUI dll.exe. It's a legitimate executable file. It's signed digitally. It's a component of F-Secure software. And when it executes, it will search for fs-lapi.dll file. And if it's in the same folder, it will load it. So it's the old technique, DLL hijacking, yeah, old but gold. So fs-lapi.dll is a PlugX loader, and it will read data from decrypt and encrypt data from fs-lapi.dll GUI. This is PlugX main. The next step, PlugX main will inject its code into svchost.exe, and persistence is achieved by creating service, AMTUI. So that's it. And you see the table here with a lot of plugins. So basically, PlugX was named PlugX because of a huge amount of different plugins.
Yeah, and all this, actually PlugX is a model Trojan, and you can see that with help of these modules, it basically provides the full access to compromised endpoint, and the attacker can control this endpoint. And as Artem mentioned, this DLL hijacking technique is exploited widely by Chinese groups, and not only in PlugX, but in many other Trojans. They use this technique to launch their payloads.
You will see it later, yeah. So after analyzing a bunch of NetFlow logs, we made a list of interesting connections. We extracted few CNCs, RSTSC.net, clownvt.com, pneword.net. Pay attention to especially this CNC. And at that time, we thought that it was PlugX CNC. So we tried to find out the file that was behind this pneword.net, and we found legitimate file again, msmessages.exe. It was component of Bluetooth stack for Windows by Toshiba, digitally signed, so perfectly legitimate file. It will use DLL hijacking to load DLL, tos.bt.kbd.dll. It's shadow path loader. It will read information from tos.bt.kbd.co, shadow path main. Next step is to inject its code to svchost.exe and create, for persistence, create service named messenger.
Yeah, and
just a second. Compare this slide, yeah, PlugX, and this slide, shadow path. Looks similar.
Yeah, and actually, we decided not to observe these two Trojans in details, like in technical details, because PlugX firstly was observed in 2008 and ShadowPath in 2017. So both Trojans well described by cybersecurity vendors. And for ShadowPath, I really recommend the article published by Sentinel-1 Lab. They not only describe the Trojan, but they also describe the server component, which controls the compromised endpoint. And there was also described some connections of developer of these Trojans.
One difference that I noticed between PlugX and ShadowPath is in ShadowPath, if it will be executed with admin rights, instead of creating a service for persistence, it will use old technique, put itself in registry in run folder. So Microsoft Windows, blah, 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 auto start with Windows. So for me, for incident responder, the main question, how did all of this start? Yeah. So what's the initial point? And we collect a lot of information, get a lot of indicators of compromise, and we noticed the first traces on October in 2016, so 2 years before our incident response. Do you think the company hadn't have a single compromise assessment for 2 years? They have a good antivirus solution. They had compromise assessment, penetration testing. They have compliance to regulatory and all kind of stuff, but they haven't seen PlugX for 2 years. How? How do they hide? We found one interesting tool. It calls DFIR Downloader. It used as a first stage for downloading PlugX. After the tool started, it will check the current date and time. It will start working only if it's Tuesday or Thursday, and only from 9 till 10 a.m. And after it starts working, it will connect to a specific HTML page and extract 0 or 1. If it's 0, sleep panda, it's okay. If it's 1, so let's do something. As a next step, stay silent for 2 years. Create new user, collect information piece by piece, and suddenly in 2018, start working really hard. Let's talk about what was able to reconstruct by carving information. So as I said, first traces of the attack we saw in October 2016. There were a few tasks, and there was interesting file, wuauthor.exe. It was detected by antivirus Kaspersky after 9 months. So you can make a child, yeah? In February, threat actors create user temp and try to upload 2 files. We don't know what was the files, but you see there is TS client, so they were trying to upload it from somewhere. It was detected and stopped. In April, they created new user, temp.av, and create the first time we see java.exe. It's proxy tool, so just for redirecting traffic. The next step, June 2017, threat actors start using user SC admin. It's domain administrator with the weak password, really weak password. They examine some folders, put their stuff in Oracle folder, and create few services to establish tunnel from the Chinese CNC through 2 servers inside the network to isolated host. Oh, and else. In June 2017, we see the new version of java.exe, the proxy tool, but date of creation was modified by another tool. So this group used a specific tool to modify date, time of creation, yeah. So modifies timestamps. In July 2017, Kaspersky finally found the backdoors. And in August 2017, 1 year before the main attack, threat actors upload winserpt.exe. That is the tool that I told about that will start working only on Tuesday and Thursday, only from 9 to 10 p.m. And it's also achieved persistence through the servers. So it's a good idea to hunt for Chinese tools by analyzing all the 7045 events in system event logs. All the tools that we saw using service creation. Okay, here we go. 2018. In April, we see a few more tools for proxy. In July, Mimikatz. Everyone knows what is Mimikatz, yeah? The tool to extract passwords from the system. And then in August, we see Zero-T tool. It's a backdoor, and it's usually used as a first step to download PlugX. And finally, we see the first PlugX on 3 servers. And in August, a lot of PlugX around, some PowerShell scripts to download something new, and also ShadowPad. And here's the question. Why do you need PlugX and ShadowPad? Why do you need both on the same server? Do you have an answer?
So, threat intelligence team made a version that before 2016, some group 1, we attributed these actions to APT 10. They made initial intrusion, and unfortunately our incident response team wasn't able to retrieve logs before 2016. And 2 years later, backdoors of this first group was used to deploy new Trojans, including ShadowPad, and we attributed this, the second attack, to APT41. So at the same time, we don't have any reasons to deploy both Trojans, because both programs work perfectly, I think so, and the only reason here is that 2 groups were involved into this operation.
So let's make it clear. 2 departments have different aims, and they use the tools that are convenient for them. This is the end of my reconstruction. So we found a few CNCs. We found more PlugX installations, a new proxy tool, and new tunnels. And only for 1 month, from August until September 2018, threat actors stole approximately 6 gigabytes of data. And all the data is documents. So a lot of documents.
So let me give you some overview of the incident. The first group conducted the attack before 2016, and they used 2 types of downloaders. And first was very simple. It's some kind of shell downloader. It's just maps the payload into memory and move execution there. And the second is the third downloader, which executed only during scheduled time. As main Trojans, they used ShadowPad, PlugX, and the third unknown RUD. So I mean unknown because we weren't able to attribute or classify it as some known remote access tool, but most of these samples, they were obfuscated, and we codenamed this obfuscator as Y-loader, and I'll show later how we used this obfuscation technique to attribute other attacks. And to communicate with isolated hosts, they used a lot of back-connect proxies. And as well, they used attribute changer to make not the incident, but forensics analysis more difficult. And important thing here that the second intrusion was done via old backdoor deployed by the first group 2 years later. So even if the company had detected the first attack and conducted incident response, they didn't do that properly, and these uncovered backdoors were used by the second group 2 years later to access the infrastructure. Next slide. Yeah. So let me give you 2 more examples where we conducted incident response. So in Group IB, our threat intelligence department and investigations work closely with incident response teams. So we share information we obtain, and this helps us to do our work better. So in another organization, where we conducted incident response, we observed that the attack started from Ghost Rat. It is also well-known old remote access tool used by Chinese threat actors. And this Trojan was also obfuscated by Y-loader. And we observed there a new version of microsyn. So 3 or 2 years ago, this version of microsyn was new, but I think a year ago it was described by Asset and Kaspersky Lab. And during this operation, they also used two programs to exfiltrate data. We codenamed it as just data exfiltrate and USB spy. And actually, this USB spy tool was the first tool I've ever analyzed in my life, which worked to collect data from flash drives. Yeah, next slide. So let me give you a few words about microsyn. So as well as all others, Trojans used by Chinese threat actors, it exploits DLL hijacking technique. And actually, it's quite simple. So if you reverse engineer it, it will not be difficult to do that. And interesting thing that they used steganography in their downloader. So the first stage just makes a simple HTTP request without any SSL encryption to its command and control server to download an image. And in this image is encoded the payload. So you can see here that 3 pictures are somehow related to Mr. Putin and something military. But we also observed 2 other pictures which are not connected to Russia or any CIS countries. But our YAR rules hunted, most of samples hunted by our rules probably gave us samples which were used to attack Russian organizations. And because this Trojan writes its logs, we were able also to restore some actions made by this Trojan in the compromised infrastructure. And to decrypt the payload encoded in these pictures, you need a special password. So 3 pictures here, 3 payloads here were encoded by password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1 with 1
QAZ,
2 WS6. Yeah, and it's important. Another incident happened in a Malaysian bank, I think 2 years ago. And firstly, we thought that it's just a ransomware case because they received a ransom note. Even more customers of this bank, while trying to get OTP codes to confirm their transactions, they were receiving really weird data. and
encrypted data.
Yeah, so we started to conduct incident response, and again we identified Buhtrap, YLoader, BNG, and Cosmosis and Calypso. So Calypso is a name given by Positive Technologies, I think 2 years ago. But when we conducted this incident response, it was quite new. Our first finding was Buhtrap, so that was the first sign that it is not just a ransomware case. And during our further analysis, we confirmed that the operation was conducted by APT-22. And during their lateral movement phase, they used open source tools like Mimikatz, TCP port scanner, netcount, and many others.
So ransomware, ransom node was used only like a smoke screen to hide the real aim of the operation.
Yeah, we think so. So when we finished the incident response, we decided that, first of all, we observed at least 2 groups, again, were involved into that case, and actually the initial intrusion was made in 2017, and during 2 years they were exfiltrating documents, and they also deployed VM image with Monero miner. And this miner started to work at 3 a.m. on 15,000 endpoints. So these guys started to get some money, except information, and
except salary.
Yeah, and in March of 2019, the organization detected this suspicious activity, so they hired some security company to conduct incident response. And so I read this report, and it was really nice. Seems like the victim didn't take enough measures to clean up the network, and again, 6 months later, the second group used old backdoors to deploy the Trojans, and these Trojans were new. But the first group used just Buhtrap and other Trojans, which were obviously linked to Chinese threat actor. But new Trojans, the Trojans of the second group, they were new. So YLoader is just a very simple program which is used to decrypt the payload and run it. And luckily, there are some debug strings, so you can use them to write your own YAR rules and to hunt to other samples. And we did it. New Trojan, Cosmosis. And firstly, there was no direct links to Chinese threat actors, but this Trojan, its body was encrypted and decrypted by YLoader. So if you write these YAR rules, you'll be able to find a lot of Chinese Trojans which are launched with this obfuscator or loader. And Cosmosis is quite simple. It's just actually provide access, remote access to shell, and helps the attacker to connect via RDP. So let me summarize the problems. We have a lot of tools which are used by Chinese threat actors, and you can't make any direct attribution. If you see PlugX or ShadowPad, you can't make direct link to some specific Chinese threat actor. As well, they, at the same time, they update their arsenal, they use new Trojans, new tools, and sometimes you can't attribute using information you have before on old groups to attribute your current attack or your current case. Interestingly, that in all these three cases, these attacks were conducted by several groups, not one. And this also makes some problems for intelligence team to attribute these attacks. And we have two ways here. First is every time you observe something new, you can just make new code name. You say, hey, we identified new APT, and generate tons of marketing materials, makes publishments, advertisement. That's a way. But you know, as a threat intelligence specialist, I prefer to use old names because otherwise one group has many aliases and it's not easy to operate with a group which has 10 different names, and also they share. So you don't have clear attributes how to link some attack to any specific group. So we decided, okay, we will not attribute it to some Chinese group, but let's say it was done by state-sponsored Chinese group. And we started to write YAR rules to attribute samples, and then we collected all command and control service and started to analyze infrastructure these samples use. And then we found some correlations in infrastructure. So correlation in infrastructure is the way how you can attribute Chinese state-sponsored APTs. And actually, this is, continuous work. So you can't make this job and finish it, because every time you'll observe new samples and you have to improve your YAR rules and enrich your network rules. And I'll tell you later what is network rules we use and how we can observe in real time the infrastructure used by the threat actors. But few words about attribution. As I said, the very basic and simple technique is to write YAR rules. And on example of Y-loader, you can use these debug strings to write your own YAR rule and start it to hunt on samples. And using these YAR rules, for example, on VirusTotal, but if you have access to some public sandboxes, or even if you have your own sandbox and you have nice feeds of samples, you can use these YAR rules and use them not only on encrypted samples, initial samples, but also use them on memory regions where any obfuscated or encrypted Trojan has to be decrypted to work properly. So the idea is to use these YAR rules in your own sandbox and process as many samples as you can. And with this YAR rule, we found connections to GhostRat, to PlugX, and to ShadowPad. As well, if your YAR rules are quite well, or you have some kind of attribution machine like Google has, you can find some constants, specific constants, which are used. For example, here, I provided two area of codes of functions where bye-bye Trojan, which is connected to Chinese threat actor, and microsync downloader, they use the same string obfuscation technique and not the same algorithm, but the same constants. So these constants directly link to the same threat actor. I'll remind you that when this ransomware with Lazarus, WannaCry pandemic, yeah, the guy from Google attributed it to North Korea only by using constants. So it's really important to write your YARA rules to detect such things. And as well, they share the same way where they store their command and control list. As you can see, they're encrypted in netlogon.cfg. So this is actually a nice sign that both programs were developed by the same team. And another interesting thing is that Chinese threat actors, they use really simple passwords to decrypt their payloads, as well as passwords for some network accounts. And here is the picture of keyboard. And as you can see, they usually use one row symbols on the keyboard as their passwords. So yeah, it's you have to write YARA rules. Here I provided you a few YARA rules related to ransomware used in this Malaysian bank. And actually, this YARA rules one day gave us a new customer because we detected attack on another Vietnamese organization. So by hunting on samples, you can also find victims. It's also important because if you know about new operation, you can collect more information even if you don't have access to incident. Yeah, next please. So as I said we can also track infrastructure. So let's see and let's analyze these domain names which were extracted by Artem during incident response in the first case: rsc.net, clamvt.com, and yantcx.com. As you can see, all three domain names were registered using one email: ddggcc@189.cn. And this email actually was used to register 871 domain names. It seems like all of them are related to PlugX infrastructure and to the same threat actor. Actually, it's a really simple rule, and in Group-IB we use not only one such rule, but we have other rules to track PlugX infrastructure, but I don't want to provide all of them here, otherwise they will watch this video and change their infrastructure, so we'll lose the visibility. But I'll give you some homework if you find this talk interesting. Here you can see 4 other domain names which were definitely used by the same threat actor and as command and control service for PlugX. So if you find a way or logic how to track these other domain names, please contact me and I'll tell you, is it the same rule we have or not? So in November, we observed only one IP address which is connected to PlugX, and totally we have detected more than 3,000 domain names used or IP addresses used by threat actors with PlugX Trojan. For shadow path, again, if we take 2 domain names extracted during incident response, you'll notice that both domain names and hosted SSL certificate. And if you check this SSL certificate, you'll see that it has really templated strings, like for subject common, it uses my server, my organization, my group, my CA, and for locality, my city. So if you know, services like Sensis and Shodan, they provide, and also Passive Total, they provide you an ability to obtain this and to monitor SSL certificates and other open ports. So you can try to find some kind of templates threat actor uses to deploy his infrastructure. And if you track this template, you'll be able to find his infrastructure in real time. Even the attack hasn't started yet, you can be prepared and protect your perimeter. So this month, we observed 3 new IP addresses which are used by ShadowBat. Next.
Yeah. Why we decide to talk about PlugX today? While everyone is focusing their attention on ransomware epidemic that we are facing nowadays, there are state-sponsored groups behind the curtains, and unfortunately, we can usually only observe the aftermath of their actions. So here's one of the example. It's my opinion, my assumption, but please follow my logic. Last year, we all know that there was a big espionage campaign, a supply chain attack with SolarWinds, Sunburst attack. And Microsoft reported that during this attack, the part of Exchange source code was stolen last year. The next thing that we know that a proxylogon exploit was revealed publicly in March of 2021. But the Velocity said that the first exploitation was in January of 2021. And since January to March of 2021, only Chinese groups was mentioned by using proxylogon. And one of these groups was Mustang Panda, and they, during the campaign, it was like proxylogon campaign, they deployed the new variant of PlugX. It named Thor. So it's evolving, it's happening right now, and it's evolution of Thor. And maybe, I don't want to
claim.
I don't want to claim someone, but maybe someone behind the attack on SolarWinds was someone with a red flag and the star.
Who knows?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, organizers of DeepSec. Actually, this is our first not virtual event, so we're really happy to be here.
Yeah.
And it's like a glass of water in desert.
So if you like pandas, you can ask questions.
All right, thank you very much. Are there, oh, I already see someone with a question.
So thank you for the great talk. Why do you think the attackers leave their IP addresses? I mean, in China, they do have VPNs and they can mask their IPs. Wouldn't the state actor try to disguise himself to hide his IPs?
Let me reply. So thank you for the question, but we didn't try to trace IP addresses of the attacker themselves. We just identified command and control service, and most of them were hosted in China. But again, this is not location of command and control server is not the attribution, but the Trojans which were used in these attacks are the attribution link.
Sometimes I think they use not China infrastructure.
Yeah, of course, so because even I provided IP on slides here. Some of them are located in United States, some of them in Russia,
Some of them
So,
in Netherlands.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Even in Netherlands, yeah, that's true. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
But I want to add, for example, North Korean APT, they have a good experience in hiding their IP behind the chain of proxies.
Yeah, and I think 4 years ago we published Lazarus Horizon report where we provided information how we traced their real IP address in Pyongyang. So yeah, it's possible to do. But in these cases we didn't try to do that, and even more we didn't get any access or collaboration with law enforcement to try to do that, because it is, you know, we're a private company and we're not interested in finding state-sponsored guys. Sometimes it's dangerous. I don't think it's a good thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Okay, one question from the chat.
Yes, so the question is, what is the most dangerous compromise you encountered? Did you see critical infrastructure affected or prepared for shutdown?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, but we can't tell about its critical infrastructure. So yes, of course. Nowadays it's became more often. You know, it occurs more often, but usually critical infrastructure, you need some kind of access level to do work there, but yeah, sometimes we do that incident response.
And last year we saw, I think, 4 or 5 new Trojans like USB spy that are using a USB gap technique. So it will write on USB, and so the similar that was used by Stuxnet attack on the Iran. So like 5 new versions of the same tool.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? One more question.
So thanks for the great talk. You showed us like the first incident you did the analysis with where they like had like already were 2 years in the network, and I would be interested like how long time do you need when you like analyze such a big incident like for the whole analysis?
For such incidents, is like it will be like a month maybe, because now we have a lot of engagement with usual ransomware groups. Yeah, so it may take a day or 2 days to reconstruct the whole picture, maybe 1 hour to reconstruct the whole picture. But in such incidents, we need to carve information, carve all the logs, and try to reconstruct the picture and get the puzzle from the pieces of information. So it could be really hard.
Thank you.
Yeah, even more, as you saw, this group uses, so espionage group, they try to hide their traces activity, and even more, they change attributes. And while this guy is trying to restore a picture of incident, it's somehow corrupted, might be corrupted. And they need time to understand, is it real attribute, is it real timestamp or not?
And it's usually such espionage campaigns, they happens in government agencies or political institutions, research, and it's always a lot of bureaucracy. So that it's not so easy to fight with bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, thank you. One more question.
After you have analyzed such an incident, how sure can you be that you have an accurate picture of what happened, and how do you compensate for uncertainties if you have any?
If I get it right, we can't be sure that we reconstruct the whole picture. It's always a little bit of paranoia. Have I find everything or not? But we need to stop somehow. So in that case that I told about, when we see the first tasks 2 years ago, it was like, okay, we don't see any initial points before, and we don't have any logs, we don't have anything. Even the host companies, providers of the internet, they don't have such logs from the past. So that's it.
Yeah, and actually there are not one but few approaches in incident response, and while Artem is trying to understand how it started, how it happened, intelligence team is collecting as much as possible information about this specific threat actor to understand their possible ways to conduct operation. And we collect all this information like, Artem, please check this vector, please check this vector. And when he checks everything, even then we examine NetFlow and search for suspicious connections. If there is no suspicious connections and we checked everything, what else we can do? So sometimes you just checked all versions you have, and it's time to stop.
All right, thank you. We'll need to stop. That's a good. It's a good point to end the Q&A, I think.
Thank you. I hope it was interesting.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.